friends, and welcome to the Indiana Esports Network. My name is Nyarka. I'm here with Zobi, and we're about to dive in and cast Carmel High School versus Bluffton High School here in Tetris. This is a new experience for me. I think it's a new experience for you too, Zobi, but we are super excited to be here, about to dive into a very interesting matchup.
Oh, for sure. You know, I played a lot of Tetris in high school, so I don't want to say I'm necessarily qualified, but I did wreck you in our pre-show tech checks here over on Tetrio. And speaking of the game that we're going to be playing at Tetris, right, there's so many different, I guess, kind of versions or formats or variants you can play, but today we're going to be going to Tetrio. I believe it's going to be 1v1 versus knockouts, and we're going to see some of the best in the state. I think the matchup that you just listed, for example, is the top 2 out of 3, you know, of the state, so that's going to be spicy to check out. But we want to remind you about what everyone's playing for, right? This is a Swiss round. If you place high, you get points to qualify towards that single elimination that is later on. And also, these games can go really, really quick, right? One mistake, your piles are going to eliminate you. So it's best of 5. So you have a few opportunities to make sure you don't just get knocked out by your opponent. And we were kind of gauging things. We were curious, right, Narco, of how fast are these games going to go? How skilled are these individuals compared to, you know, the championships that we've watched beforehand?
Yeah, it's certainly going to be the case that here in Tetrio, the dynamics are a little bit different if you come from the CTWC background like I do, where these players using that rolling strategy are able to take it to a really high level. They don't have to deal with all the junk in the trunk, though, that's being thrown this way and that way in this kind of game. So in this one, for sure, I think that these are going to be much more rapid, particularly if you're at my skill level for someone like Zobi, who was, as you said, absolutely wrecking me. So hopefully we don't get any of these big mismatches, but like you said, there is also that time to evolve and develop, as everybody will be jamming best of 5s.
And if you guys would like to check out the matches that are currently happening, like we said, our first match is going to be Carmel High School versus Bluffton High School. You can also see how the previous matches a week ago went to see who currently has points and what their standing are on League OS. So if you want to play in esports, if you want to search through a lot of collegiate opportunities or this tournament itself, you can go to portal.leagueos.gg to search. And even if you're part of the Indiana Esports Network, you can sign in to manage your own profile. And like I said, check up the stats for match to match. In addition, if you're, like we said, stellar or talented at these games, there's also scholarships and esports coaches and everything. And all of these resources are free. So go check out League OS Portal to get involved in your local esports community today.
Yeah, they got their fingers in so many different pies, Zobi, in a good way, I should say. I feel like that has a negative connotation when I say it like that. You don't want to ruin a pie. But yeah, these were the people who were supporting the College of William and Mary that I used to work at throughout their run in NECC. Yes. They have really fantastic reach all across the esports ecosystem and are a great place by which to learn and develop and grow as an esports athlete at any level of skill and any level of competition. But I also do want to give a shout out to Zotac, who is one of our sponsors who's really helping to bring IE and to the masses here. I really think that they are one of the biggest players here in the entirety of the scholastic esports scene. They're one of the few sponsors that really wants to focus upon developing this realm, and they very much deserve our thanks. So make sure that you give them a shout out on Twitter and all of the social medias that you guys occupy. You can use hashtag powered by Zotac or hashtag ZotacUSA when you post. And if you want more info, always put exclamation point Zotac into the chat.
And earlier, Narka, you mentioned, right, that League OS and building communities in esports is really important. Well, nobody does it better than LANFest, right? And they're a huge partner as well for today's stream. So thank you to them for building healthy communities through gaming with 23 chapters across 18 states and over 150 events a year. I know I've been to a few of them. You know, they're going to DreamHack here very, very soon for fundraising. I know they do the Battle for Charity that I've gotten to watch and hopefully one day will be a part of. But you also can find an event near you at lanfest.com. So don't be afraid to get involved again with these esports communities if it's something that's of interest to you. It takes one leap, one opportunity. I know I wasn't always in esports. I'm sure you weren't either, Nyarko, but here we are, ready to cast Tetris.
For sure. I mean, you saw my gameplay. I think you realize that I am not the greatest at these kinds of games, but we are about to dive into this first matchup. Like we said before, it is going to be Carmel High School versus Bluffton High School. Dark Ninja and Stalpo being the two representatives here. I believe that's almost an ELO count there off to the right of their flag. So representing different countries, maybe also representing different skill levels if we're looking at those as kind of bandwidths and ranks here. Could this perhaps lead to someone already showing that they might have an advantage?
I think it does in my mind, right? It levels usually off of experience, or if it's like, chess.com style rankings, then they might be a lot higher of an echelon. But we're going to jump into the game here. Another thing to point out is that currently Stalpo is undefeated 4-0, while X Dark Ninja is 3-1. So this is a great opportunity for them to kind of repair their games. And currently we have our observer getting ready to jump into the game. They're not a contestant, guys, right? Because then they'll probably get, duked out like I did to you, Nark, and I'm joking. You were good. You were developing very, very fast, which I think is also important, and what I think leagues like this can offer to students is that growth, because if you're not competing, you can't get better.
Definitely the case. Now, to tie these players to the respective teams here, Stalpo is the one jamming for Carmel High School, while Bluffton High School is bringing Dark Ninja to the table. So it's very interesting to see such a large organization in the form of a high school kind of putting a lot of their hopes on individual players one after the other here. A lot of eyes are going to be on these people, and going into a live broadcast like this, but with the IEN being powered by all these different sponsors, it can definitely be a little bit of a pressuring situation versus, as you were saying, playing after your CS class during high school. So perhaps that movement environment could also be something that could affect both of these players.
Oh, for sure. And you mentioned, right, that they have this support system, the schools backing them. But what I noticed from Leo West also is that they have coaches, they have managers backing them. And I'm just trying to think about like what coaching looks like from a Tetris perspective, right? Because I feel like it is very fast paced, a lot of pressure. And I'm like, are they like trying to be like, okay, maybe you shouldn't stack up as high, keep it as low as possible, clear your lines out, keep it clean. Because what you're going to notice when we jump in a game, a big factor of the versus knockout is that when you send lines to your opponent, it sends them in the form of these gray boxes that have gaps that are kind of like randomized where they appear. So you might have to keep that area of the map open or cleared as fast as possible just so you can get that safety net back. So in Tetris, right, traditional Tetris, you're trying to build out those kind of back-to-back, I should say, like Tetrises. And in this game, it's very, very different, right? You're trying to send lines fast, and you're also trying to, I feel like having the skill to wedge yourself out of uncomfortable situations, like when you get towards the top and you're needing to clear a lot of lines really quickly. That's what I'm going to be looking for towards a skill set, Nyarko.
Yeah, I mean, you're using me as a guinea pig trying to figure out what the optimal strategy was in our games before we got on stream here. So with that being the case, I think that what we'll see here is a little bit of a shifting of strategies. Both of these players seem to be of relatively high level, though, so perhaps they already have a game plan going into this one. But definitely, if you are someone who is jamming Tetris in other formats, Tetris Effect is obviously still a big thing, and classic Tetris is something that continues to have many eyes turned towards it, particularly as we're developing towards trying to get that big rebirth and reset at the end of the game and stuff like that. You can kind of come in with a preconceived notion about how Tetris goes, but Tetrio is its own little world and its own environment by which people have to develop a new mindset. And I think that's really going to be valuable, putting people into these scenarios where you got to make the decision. Do you want to play riskily? Do you think you have the ability to do so? As particularly when the velocity of the game is so high, you were hard dropping me left, right, and center. Your APM was about 10 times mine.
Yeah.
And that, I think, is also going to be a huge deciding factor. Maybe at the end of the day, strategy won't matter quite as much if you are just simply better at slotting all the pieces together.
But that was the issue as well, I noticed, in the game versus me and you, is there was one point where it got really, really dicey. Like, I was, like, at the very bottom, okay, of my, like, I cleared the entire board, and then you suddenly sent, like, 5 to 6 lines, and I was like, okay, I actually just covered that up, so now I have to wait for the right piece. I have to clear that out as fast as possible to get rid of it, because then I lose that kind of, I guess, buffer zone, or that safety net of, okay, if I want to start building up to send you more lines to get those kind of Tetrises, which is what I play for more when I play Tetris, I have to remind myself, okay, those aren't important. You aren't playing for points combos. You have to just send them lines as fast as possible. So I think what I'm going to be looking forward to also is, like you said, that risk of, are they going to kind of go for these combos, build it up really, really high, or are they going to keep, those 2, 3, 4, what the max of a single link height is, just so that they can get them out as fast as possible without putting themselves in jeopardy.
And on that front, I really do think that a lot of this comes down to how much of the game and how many inputs you can take into your mental stack at once. And that's what I really want to see between these two players as we are, in fact, diving into the game. For me, I was full tunnel vision. I could only look at my stack and what I was building, Zobi.
Exactly.
Meanwhile, you were looking at the pieces coming up, you were looking at the players, and look at the input speed that these two players are flying at. Already, Dark Ninja trying to pass some lines over, but this is a very ragged stack for Stalpo. Doesn't seem to matter. He is moving at lightning speed right now.
Oh, for sure. And the fact is, as I mentioned beforehand, you can just do it for clearances, and that's exactly what Dark Ninja's playing for, but it doesn't matter. Just the speed at which Stalpo is applying these, and also the T-spins that I'm seeing just to bail them out, it is lethal. And Dark Ninja cannot hold on. But like you said, this is a first to 3, so let's see if the second round is any better for Dark Ninja.
Stalpo already at 4-0 like you're talking about, and we are clearly seeing why. I was expecting a little bit better play than what I was being demonstrated earlier, but not to this level. The rapidity at which they were able to just line everything together shows a brain far younger than mine, jamming together perfectly. That being said, Dark Ninja has been able to burn down really hard. Stalpo answers right back in kind and has a pretty decent run of bricks coming their way. Unfortunately, there's a little bit of a hole immediately with the T-spin. We'll be able to clear out towards the bottom. But Dark Ninja certainly holding on a little bit better than that last round, keeping their game plan together, having a lot of openings, dropping that eyepiece down, and getting a big hole going. Now, with another dependency, if they can drop that bar, Stalpo could be in trouble. A lot less space now by which to clear. Gonna drop a wonky Z there, but will still manage to stabilize, and we're right back to neck and neck.
And this is what I just mentioned, as it looks like Stalpo's pulling ahead, is that they were so close and in jeopardy for so long because they built so high up and couldn't clear out that long bottleneck. But once they finally get it done, once they finally get back to clearing out that board, they're able to pull back ahead because of that superior send speed. But great job for Dark Ninja to hold on as long as they were, to keep things low and just send when absolutely necessary and clear out that gray area. But now, Stalpo's still now up 2-0, and they are just back to business without having that, mess up without that fault. And also these T-spins, great at clearing out these blunders.
One thing to note here is that even from the very beginning, given that each player has the same shapes coming their way, what you're seeing is a very different philosophy right from the start of the game. Stalpo, quite a bit more open to making wonky builds here because they know they have the speed and reaction time by which to get out of it, and they're just sending far more lines over to Dark Ninja than on the other side. And I feel like Dark Ninja, if anything, is actually starting to play slower here to try to respond and play strategically, but now they're put once again into a very difficult position. They have to stop themselves from being dropped 3-0, but unfortunately there will be no savior. Stalpo walks away with a blazing fast run in this best of 5.
And I can see why they are currently undefeated here in the Indiana Esports Network after a dynamic performance of what we just saw. And I love what you pointed out, Neriko, because I felt like on the side of Dark Ninja, they were definitely playing more traditionally, right? You said like going in order, making sure they were clean as they built, and also keeping things lower, like I said, to clear out that gray area because of maybe the expected speed of sending lines like Stalpo was able to achieve. Versus I saw T-spin after T-spin after T-spin from this side of Stalpo, and that could clear out, like you mentioned, and I think keep those lines as continuous as they were being sent. Kudos to Dark Ninja, though. I think they definitely put Stalpo in an uncomfortable position, I think once or twice during that best of 5, but ultimately 3-0, pretty clean sweep here so far. And I wouldn't be surprised if I go to Stalpo's history and see like, oh, they haven't even dropped a map, right?
And what's really good is that we now have this baseline by which we can analyze the potential strengths of these players via the level count that we saw. Apparently someone hitting those 1500s is just a god of the game at the end of the day, Zobi. But Dark Ninja, like you said, was clearly very competitive and has, up until this point, had a good run here in the IHSEN matchups, going 3-1 so far. So there's plenty of certified killers. It just could be the case that Stalpo will go above and beyond everybody else. And I kind of almost hope that's the case to a degree. Clearly they deserve the dub here, but what I'm looking for are some closer matchups where maybe both players are taking a little bit more time to play deliberately. That'll certainly help me as a play-by-play because my goodness, I cannot speak fast enough to deal with what Stalpo's doing.
And what was interesting for me though is, number one, congrats, because that's Carmel High School coming out from the Stalpo being the representative. But for Dark Ninja and Stalpo, we talked about maybe the speed differential, but both of these teams, as mentioned to us, was that they are part of the top 3 in the state, right? And I can see why Dark Ninja is that far up there, because we were mentioning, right, trying to understand, what is the optimal strategy between, speed and cohesion and staying alive. And I think Dark Ninja had that kind of stay alive mentality very, very well. I think you saw, for example, they were playing above the danger zone for a while and staying alive there. But unfortunately, just Stalpo getting ahead of them allowed them to stay ahead. But I definitely am curious about who that third in the picture is, right? To see if they can maybe contest against Stalpo, or if we just got an early look of who may be the best in the Indiana Esports Network. But I also agree with you. I want to see some closer levels and see if the gameplay slows down or if we see a little bit more competition.
And of course, we could be going to the other side of the coin. Maybe we will see someone rise to the occasion, play at that level of Stalpo, because there's still room for improvement. There's room for development with these players. Like I said, I think that Stalpo was trading cleanliness in their lines, in their gameplay, in order to just go at a super fast speed. And that definitely works if you're playing against someone that you know you're better than. Maybe they've scoped themselves out of the past. Maybe they've met on ladder, because then you just send junk time and time again. But when it comes to managing a stack, when it comes to managing and pushing back and clearing out what is being sent your way at the same rate, now all of a sudden the clarity and the ability to not get into crazy dependencies is going to be super important there. And because you get a run of, say, square blocks in a row, the raggedness of what we saw in that stack could have easily done Salpo in for at least one of those rounds.
Oh, for sure. I think they hit the red zone at one point for that exact reason, right? They had, I think, like a 4 or 5 long gray block they just couldn't clear out, probably because of this messiness, because they have to now wait for the right piece to where you're clearing the lines, but you're not covering the hole that you have to start covering up, which is the big difficulty when you get into those messier pictures. And the T-spins, yes, can bail you out, but if they're right over your current hole you have to plug, then they're not going to help you out in that situation. You're still going to stay up that high. And this is Wild Dark Ninja is now consistently sending you lines, because you're finally, I feel like, stalling out their attacks and you're on the offensive, which is a great counterbalance now to see is who's going to be on the offensive, who's going to be on the defensive, and if that ability can get traded despite the speed, which is what we saw from Stalpo and Dark Ninja that I really liked, even though Stalpo, it seemed like, was really, really dominant in the score line and in the line sent, per minute.
Definitely the case. I do wonder if Tetrio is both of these players' main form of jamming Tetris, or if they perhaps come from a different game. I'm thinking that just because both of these players were emphasizing what you were talking about in terms of strategy earlier, Zobi, with wanting to just go line by line, wanting to send as many things over as possible, that both probably are forged in this fire. And I wonder, given the fact that we are casting high schoolers here, this is actually the main way that many of them are interfacing with Tetris these days. And therefore, these skill sets are forged in Tetrio and are meant to play towards its strengths.
Oh, for sure. Like, when I look at Stalpo, I see modern Tetris all the way. Like, I can see, like, us having to tell them to slow down in, like, normal Tetris, because your speed doesn't matter. It's more about that kind of cohesion of blocks, like how, I guess, consistent you are and not making those blunders and ensuring you have these Tetris streaks. And on the other side with Dark Knight, they were very clean at first, and then once they kind of pitfalled, then they were like, okay, let me focus on getting back and clearing out that space really quickly, which I think is what they were really good at, was thinking ahead. But we are trying to figure out what our next match is going to be, Narco. And since we talked about it, that was kind of our top 2 out of 3 so far in the state. What do you think our next match is going to hold?
Ooh, I'm not sure in terms of the level of competition here. I'm personally just getting my feet wet with Tetrio, getting back into the realm of playing Tetris. You saw that being the case, but we are diving in. DNA Pickle versus Sheets 15.
It's a lot closer.
This is a lot closer, a lot more deliberate for both sides, but these are some messy stacks that especially DNA Pickle are going to have to try to find their way out of.
Oh, for sure. And I can see the formulation. I can see the mistakes stacking up for DNA Pickle here. And that's so unfortunate, because look at the cleanliness coming out from Sheets 15, right? They're just trying to, like it's mentioned, think about where you're placing your blocks so you can clear out that gray area. And that's, I think, the issue both of these players are running into. And also you're running into the issue of not being able to rebound. And just like that, a best of 5 that was tied 2-2. We get to witness the victor, the crowning of Sheets 15, 3-2.
Absolutely crazy stuff here, as Sheets is going to bring that one away. Good thing that we didn't get to see too much of that match and that it wasn't too fast, Zobi, because I would be afraid of being taken off the air by saying Sheets' name wrong. But, what we did see from them, I think, is a rock-solid game plan that I really want to now see brought into these other settings, and I'm sure that week in, week out, as we continue to progress through the Swiss stage, that we will be seeing plenty more of them and everybody else coming our way.
Oh, for sure. And, we definitely saw, I think, a slower pace from both of those players. And that's what I think is going to be interesting is, that balance of speed and thoroughness, and also just ensuring that you aren't making as many blunders. Because I think what we saw kind of be the kryptonite of Sheets' opponent was that I feel like they were maybe trying to go too fast, and I saw them make a few blunders where they could place their pieces to start clearing out those, I guess, that trash pile that they had built up in order to come back. And while simultaneously, right, it was consistent clearance and I guess kind of confidence in where they were placing their pieces out of Sheets. So now they are the ones that are crowned the victors.
It is one of those things where, at least in my experience of playing Tetrio, you get to a point where you just think in your mind, I must survive. It is the line that I'm currently on that needs to be cleared. I don't care about what's under me. And in many cases, that could be an undoing because you begin to play sloppily. You begin to look for that last little bit of respite that could perhaps get you burned down in the future. But by thinking of the now, you don't get to work towards winning opportunities. You are simply playing to last for another few seconds. And I think that when people get into that situation, quality of play goes out the window, even for some very high level competitors here. And so I think that DNA Pickle definitely could have a solid record, could have a solid play style. It's just if you get pressured hard enough and you see how fast things can turn on the dime as a bunch of junk gets thrown over to you, that you just are put into the worst situation possible. So in the future, I really do think that they are also someone who can remain competitive. And I think this is going to be a dynamic that we're still going to have to watch out for.
Yeah, and I think I was trying to look at the stats here for O'Sheep's 15 as well. I think they might also be from... No, I'm trying to figure out what school they're from. It's BHMSD versus, I think it was Nightstown Community High School. I could be wrong. But right now, O'Sheets, they actually have a very mixed record, right? I think they were 2-2 coming into this match, so hopefully that'll put them on the positive end of things. But outside of that, I think what... I'm curious is I want to dive into, I guess, the stats more, because we can see those stats as they were like on, I feel like, the Tetrio website, right? Like the lines or the pieces per second, right? The lines per, I guess, minute that you're sending them. And I think, like, for example, in that last game, they were very, very close in those statistics versus Stalpo was a lot faster at the sends. So again, even though you're the fastest, you might not be the best. And I think, I hope that our next match that we'll get to jump into here soon is going to display that.
Yeah, I'm currently looking at the overall regular season leaderboards as they are on that wonderful League OS website that you guys should check out here. And one thing to note is the fact that Stalpo is currently under Opye, and it's down to the number of game wins. But given that both are 4-0, I don't know why Opye played 3 more. Perhaps they've already moved on to 5-0, and it's just where we are in the rounds in the bracket. But it shows that Stalpo clearly has some competition. There's another person with that perfect 100% win rate still jamming up against them, and eventually I'm sure they will have to.
Yeah, and what's interesting here, right, is that this is still the regular season. This isn't playoffs. There's no single elimination. It's Swiss. And what they want to do is they have 3 rounds of Swiss each week, and your points are awarded based on standings at the end of each split. So, like you mentioned, that record is going to become very, very important because I'm guessing that if you tie, you probably get the same points, or maybe it's a head-to-head if you ever faced off against the person that you were tied with, and if you won, then you might get those points because it's top 32 players that go to that single elimination playoffs. And if you go to the Tetris one-pager on the League OS website, you get to see that points breakdown, and it's about 4 points between each tier of placement, and then it goes all the way down to 41 plus. So there's gonna be a lot of players that are very, very similar, I feel like, in their standings. So I'm curious to see how that tiebreaker is gonna be calculated, tabulated, and what you have to think of then when going into these games is like, I don't need to be the first, I need to be in the top 32, and then once I get to that single elimination, that's what's gonna matter.
And for those of you who are new to Tetris, one of the nice things that has even been brought to the realm of classic Tetris is the fact that there's no RNG in regards to the pieces you get. Of course, they are randomly generated, but they are randomly generated uniformly for both sides. And so therefore, right from the beginning of the game, you can see the differentiation in strategy and how they are looking at the future lines within a game. So these are perfectly even matches going into it. It's just about what you do on that field of battle that matters the most.
But with that, we kind of, like you said, have different Tetris backgrounds, right? And I think that we can maybe discuss, like you said, for newer viewers, what some of those differences are, right? And so for the side of normal Tetris, right, you accumulate points based off of combos, based off of streaks, based off of T-spins, etc. It's not as speed-based, right? It's more strategy, how you're building these lines with the pieces that you said are randomly generated, randomly given. There's also the format called Sprint, which is what me and my friends used to play, and that's how fast you can clear a set number of lines, which... when we were watching Stalpo, I feel like that's what they may be the best at, I'm not gonna lie to you. And then there's Battle, which is, this back and forth push and pull. That I think is a good mix of both Sprint and classical Tetris, right? Because you want to balance speed with cleanliness and I guess combos, because the more you combo, the more lines you send, and the harder it is for your opponent to get themselves out of that situation. And I do like that when you get to the tail end of Battle, right? Versus, I guess it's not the same when you do Sprint, because Sprint you want to be flawless in. It does tap into that potential of how fast can you clear yourself out of the hole or the trash pile that you're in, right? How fast is your ability to get yourself out of these corner situations that otherwise you're going to lose if you can't bail yourself out of. And that's what I want to see, is a comeback from somebody. I want to see them be able to get to that tippy top, cleared all the way down, and come back as the underdog. But We'll have to wait and see if we get that in some of our rounds today. And it looks like we're going to get a little home battle. Carmel High School versus Carmel High School. That's going to be nutty to witness here. And are we getting Stalpo back? It looks like it. So we might get to see two undefeated legends go head-to-head here, Nyarko.
Yeah, this is the matchup I wanted to see. This is the one that we were talking about earlier. There's Opie there at the very top with 12 wins straight versus Stalpo, currently at 9-0. So now that they're coming in, round number 2 of the day versus one another, one of the O's must go. And given that that dynamic is at play here, I think that we are going to see not only the strategies that we pointed out with Stalpo becoming a point of tension in this game, but also those other dynamics where when you are in survival mode, how can you handle playing at the rate that you currently are without giving up too much to the opponent that will allow for them to land a killing blow later.
Yeah, and something else to point out, right, is that our first match when we saw Stalpo, they might not know how fast their opponent plays if they haven't played against them prior in one of the earlier weeks. I think we're in week 2 of the IEN for Tetris. Versus, you know, these two players, right, they had the same coaching staff, they had the same support staff, they're probably getting the same tips, tricks, etc. for succeeding in Tetris knockout versus. But I'm curious to see then if they understand then that they're about to get slammed with that speed and counter, right? Instead, like we mentioned, right, you have to adapt on the fly of, okay, are we going to stack up and knock them down really quick, or are we going to stay towards the bottom? And I think that, you know, OPA, knowing the strategy then for Stalpo, might just go for that latter, I guess, strategy.
You know, I gotta say, it's not only that they share the same staff. They could be in the same darn room right now, Zobi, at the end of the day.
That is
they could
true.
just all be clustered up there in the esports club versus one another. Maybe they're sitting right across from one another, staring each other down. There's a whole lot on that front that I'm sure is fascinating behind the scenes here. But I think it also just goes to one thing I want to comment on for all of these schools coming in here to the Indiana Esports Network, the fact that they are supporting games as wide-ranging as Tetris, Street Fighter, and all these other things is really fantastic to watch here. So this is only one side of the coin in regards to how they play. We are about to dive into it, and you see that speed on either side is perfectly matched. Already big middle bar well dropped, going to be had for Alpia, who's stacking up the junk versus Stalpo. Stalpo firing right back. Very similar strategies on either side. Stalpo totally cleared out here, looking for a killing blow early in this one, but Apie has a watertight game plan. Even as the stack climbs, they're able to clear right back, and we remain neck and neck.
And to me right now, I feel like Uppy looks so much more well-rounded, right? Their ability to clear out the thought going into the piece placement versus, like we said, it's more reactive from the side of Stalpo, who's a little bit quicker, I feel like, in the pieces placed per second. But look at this, pulling ahead because their board is fully cleared is OPA. And like you mentioned, we're back reset. It is neck and neck again down to the gray, but look who's pulling ahead this time. It's OPA again.
Stalpo, though, had a really good well on that left side, built up 2 long bars in a row. That means that they're right back in this one, keeping those openings, keeping the stack clean. Means that now Stalpo may be able to bring it back. Apie still stabilizing, able to re-drop and bring themselves back into contention here with the T-spin. But yes, as you said, there is that one line at the very bottom there that Stalpo wouldn't have to deal with, while Apie will have to clear out a whole lot. They're starting out well, though, as they drop another long bar. 2 stacked in a row. Maybe a bit of a mistake there, putting them that high, as Apie's right on the razor's edge. Can't bring it back. Stalpo up 1-0.
And wow, like I said, these two feel like evenly matched opponents, right? Like classmates and duking it out in the same room. And we'll see if this time there aren't those mistakes. But look at OPA, an early mistake, and that could cost them this early on. A T-spin cannot save you because you need 2 of them back to back. And that pink piece is now only getting provided. Now it's been cleared out. There isn't any scent lines just yet from the side of Stalpo, because they also are trying to build up this well, build up this dynamic combo. And here that action's gonna come.
Here in the second round, it almost looks like the dynamic has flipped. Stalpo just a little bit more clean with it in regards to how they're building their stack up, especially as they are getting those blessings of long bars in places where they're able to just absolutely destroy the stack. Apie already close to topping out here, can't bring it back once again. Stalpo maybe surging ahead to a quick 3-0 victory.
And you talked about it, that dynamic change. Stalpo a lot cleaner than OPA was, and they felt like they were finally being pressured here. But this piece combo looks like they're confident in their placement, quick in it. In fact, look at this, T-spin after T-spin for OPA, and as a result, all of these lines early getting sent. And here's what I mentioned, if you can't clear out that well to get that long bar in there, you're gonna miss your opportunity, and that's exactly what they've done. So now delayed, and they still haven't placed it in. They haven't plugged that well, and so the gray is still mounting versus OPA's in a really comfortable position here, piece after piece, line after line. And talk about a clean 3-0, it might just get robbed away here soon if they don't get back to square one.
That being said, Stalpo is able to have an iron grasp. The problem is Appie set up for a big combo to kill them instantly. They weren't even in the danger zone at the end of that one, but Stalpo has to respect that. Now at a 2-1 count here, we could be going the distance.
Oh, I hope so. But look at this early opening. We talk about it. Cleanliness from the get-go and the gamble here. And the combos are mounting for Opie to try and shut them down again. And this time it's working, and it's a clean board. And that's what sucks about Tetrio Battle Versus is you need those long bars, or you cannot wedge yourself out, or you can go for C-spins, which is exactly what they're hoping for, and I don't think it's gonna work still. Look at this, their entire board is gray, Narco.
Yeah, Stalpo had a good run of shapes, but the problem is Appie was able to use the exact same run a little bit more effectively, and Stalpo continues to lag behind, finally able to pass some junk back. Now with the clean stack, he can try to build back out of this well yet again. Appie, though, able to answer right back in kind, has a lot of junk to burn through here, but several long bars will assist them in that process. Now building up, there's the center well, clear it out. Now they're gonna move over to the left side. Stalpo has opened up yet another hole in their well. Appie, though, has burned all the way down. Stalpo needs to start speedrunning this right back in order to stabilize. Has one singular well open. Here's the long bar, dropping him down. Appie firing right back, has a huge set of gaps here. Even in their colored squares, will be able to just clear that out in an instant. And the reads coming off these next pieces is absurd. And here's a hold coming through for that Z piece. Stalpo able to use that to their advantage. Now with a big opening, there's a long bar to drop it right back. And this is the longest we've seen a match go so far, Zobi, and they remain close to tying this one.
For sure. What I'm noticing is that Stalpo has a lot more trash than they clear out versus it's, again, cleanliness and the placement from Appie, which is allowing them to keep these wells open so they can plug them later on. Versus this round, like you see it, right? Stalpo blocks them and it immediately uncovers them with their speed and their precision and how fast these pieces are flying out. But just ahead of them, Appie still able to keep it neck and neck. Again, able to clear it out a lot cleaner, a lot faster, so they don't have that gray mounting as fast. But right now, it feels like a gray handoff round after round, and finally, it feels like someone was pulling ahead. And can Appie escape it here again?
And this is a different set of skills coming into the fray now. This is about endurance. Think about how fast each of these pieces are being put into place and how they have to protect them. With perfection, you need that as each opponent is at such a high level of gameplay here. If you can't keep that going for the long run, you could fall apart here. Appie definitely in more danger right now, able to burn down, about to send over a bunch of junk from this well. Stalpo almost just gets dropped there, manages to stabilize, needs to open up this well, has the opportunity, which to do so, but Appie with the combo is going to tie it up 2-2.
And we're going to the tiebreaker. We're going the distance to see who will lose their undefeated record. And again, I look at Appie and I see how fast they were able to come back from these mistakes or intentional setups for these T-spins, because look at these T-spin combos that they're able to achieve, and that's what sends lines this fast and may just make that consistency go out the window here for Stalpo. But look how clear they are, again, having to plug these well, having to hope for the right piece combos, and they're also simultaneously trading off for combos to set themselves up for success, to set themselves up for victory. And again, I love how risky Stalpo plays this, right? You mentioned it, right? Those 2 rounds lost Appie was because they were opting in instead for these victories, or I should say these setups. Like, you'll see, right, a T-spin setup to the right side, right, Narco? And they instead place their pieces to the left, and they're building up a few lines so that once they clear out that gray area, they can then mount these combos to try and disrupt that momentum that we saw Appie able to build when they had time to think, had time to process, had time to come up with, I guess, these counters and these combos that, you know, sent it from nothing to the board is full and you're in the danger zone.
And I was preoccupied with the fact that there was a misplaced tease piece for Stalpo there, building up on that left side in that final game, but it didn't matter. They had their eyes on bigger things, as you're saying, Zobi. They were able to just all of a sudden jam through. Appie had no real response, didn't even have the opportunity to stabilize there, and that is how you live and die in the game like Tetrio. It is merciless. There's no comeback mechanics. There is nothing except for 2 people pitted against one another. This is something that we very rarely see in esports these days, and I'm so happy that it's being supported here with LandFest and Indiana Esports Network.
And I mean, the speed at which they are moving, like, I think when we were watching that second match, like, or when we were watching, like Dark Ninja and that second match, I'm like, okay, I think the second match was like your speed, Narco. The opponent Stalpo went against, I want to say, was like my level of competition, right? But like, I want to know what they're feeding the kids over at Carmel High School, because to have 2 players like that in the same lobby is insane. I gotta clip it and send it to my friends I played against in high school and be like, we aren't anywhere near that caliber.
Yeah, I think that the only thing you can be feeding these kids, given the rapidity of the gameplay, is plenty of Red Bull. Hopefully, you know, they get a good balanced diet outside of that.
Hey, those are warnings to go over 18. Come on.
But yeah, these kids show so much potential, and think about the applicability of Tetris and these kind of abstract reasoning combined with speed that would apply to so many other esports. I wouldn't be surprised if these are competitors that are jamming across multiple games, filling in spots throughout the Carmel High School rosters wherever they are needed. And I think that that is also a great way to forge a future in esports if you want to take this into college.
We need, like, I feel like competitive, like, rhythm games, because I feel like rhythm games and Tetris have that good, like, parallel in particular. Other than that, what I've learned is that it really is kind of night and day if you're good at Tetris or if you're not. Because, like, there's people that I would expect to be really, really good at Tetris that have that good spatial memory, that have that kind of, I guess, logic when it comes to shapes, and then they get into Tetris and they're just a little clunky and slow, and it's just so interesting to see, like, what makes a good Tetris player. And also, like, how they can be at the same speed, like we just saw from Avier and Stalpo, but their dynamics can feel so different. Like I mentioned, Stalpo, risky, not necessarily plugging the wells as soon as possible like we saw from Avier, but instead building up for these combos versus, right, Avier only doing it when the time was right, when they felt comfortable in where their standings were in the board. And it shows who came out on top, who remains undefeated, and we have one more round coming up for you for the Indiana Esports Network and this week's Swiss stage. And I mean, this is right. I don't know how many weeks they're doing this, but you also have to remember there's only a set number of weeks, so only a set number of opportunities to build your standings to be in that top 32, to get into the single elimination playoffs.
And once you're there, the fact that it's single elimination with a game as volatile as Tetrio has proven to be, even throughout the few games that we've casted so far, Zobi, it means that there's a lot on the line every single time that you are up to the plate. It's a swing and a miss for you, and you are out of contention. And we see the level of play that you need to be at in order to have a fight towards the top of the standings. Because now I don't think squeaking in at the 32 spot is enough for you to be happy. Because then you have Api or Stalpo coming your way, absolutely looking to dominate the bracket and take this entire thing home.
You know, if I'm playing, I definitely would be in the center so I don't get paired up against those top seeds, because the skill differential is going to be wild. And you mentioned, right, that every time you play, there's something on the line because, right, I think if you lose that, right, you're not going to be moving down 1 or 2 spots. I think you're going to be moving down a chunk because it's all the people who won that game and now have that standing ahead of you. So it could be like 3 or 4 players at a time and, a few matches lost and suddenly you aren't in those playoffs. So I'm hoping that's not the case for, Stalpo or Opia with the speed and the records that they have, but in, like, the closer matches that we saw, right, the one we jumped into for that tiebreaker round, or maybe the match that we're going to see in this last round here for this week, I'm hoping that we get to see that kind of dynamic when they have these mixed records, when they feel like they have to perform.
Definitely the case. And we were talking best of 5s. We're moving to best of 7s for playoffs. I don't think that's enough, Zobi, at this point. I come from a League of Legends background. You come from a Valorant background. We'd still be in game number 1 between these two schools if we were casting either of those games.
Round 3.
There's just so much that happens in such a short period of time. And because of that, this may be the single most ruthless esport I've ever seen. And I wouldn't have expected that coming into the Tetris world, even in CTWC, matches are much longer than this.
Oh, for sure.
Just because you hit this
survival.
Kind of, peak level of the game, because it's always man versus computer. Even if it is multiple people all competing to see how well they can beat the computer at once. Yeah. It's so much different than here, where you have fine-tuned Tetris into a head-to-head monster.
Oh, and it looks like we have our matchup here as well. It looks like it's going to be MHS versus BHMSD for the high schools. It's going to be Strixix, I'm going to call it, versus Wolf Gamer, who's with Mooresville High School. There we go. So, again, we're seeing, I guess, consistency with multiple players being fronted from multiple schools, which is really nice to see. Okay, it's not a one-off player being like, hey, school, can I use your name for this event? Yeah. It's like League OS supporting these players and building out these esports competitive programs. And I'm curious to see then, again, how these coaching staffs are going to develop for these teams and their progression through the Indiana Esports Network.
Yeah, what I'm looking at here as well is the fact that this is a bracket that clearly has people that are operating at the level of Stalpo and company from before, because we've now seen Opie put down into the 4-1, right? So this is a place where we're probably going to see the same level of gameplay from before, maybe just a little bit more variation in regards to the strategy. Perhaps a few people that try to take the risks that Stalpo did, and it just did not pan out at the end of the day. A lot to be had and a lot to talk about here as we dive into this matchup. We're seeing the return of Bluffton High School to the fray. This is the team that Dark Ninja was representing. And another dynamic I'm interested about, Zobi, is that I wonder, given that you're all on a team together at the end of the day, you are still facing off 1v1, but you're able to kind of freely exchange information a lot more fluently with people right next to you. If Bluffton has its own playstyle, we're going to see parallels between now BHMSD's Strix and Dark Ninja. Maybe we'll see a little bit more deliberation coming out of them. Who's to say?
Yeah, I definitely think there's, I guess, some backer level strategies, but then also it is that inherent speed. I think that we're going to have to see how it's leveraged and if there is a difference as well. I was thinking of that, right? I feel like for games like Valor, for Overwatch, you have like these set warm-ups. Like you can hit the aim labs. What do you do for warm-ups in Tetris? You can scrim against your teammates. But here we go. It's Kyle, actually, for the side of Mooresville. And here it is, a little bit slower of a pace, right? So we're going to see that more, I guess, intentional placement coming out. Maybe more of these, I guess, traditional Tetris flows, because they're going to set themselves up for these combos like what we're seeing now build out for Strix.
I don't know how we're going to be able to handle pronouncing that one, as I think the tempo of this game is going to rise a little bit. Strix, I think, is perfectly justifiable here, but Strix already has a pretty sloppy hole that they're going to have to fill in the middle of the board. That being said, Kyle the Rep has to burn down a whole heck of a lot right now. Strix, you can see, is about doubling their piece count per second here, and therefore that means that Kyle, even though they're a little bit more deliberate with it, will have to start amping the pace up and perhaps make a few mistakes in order to stay alive.
Yeah, you mentioned that gaping hole for the side of Strix, but the speed in which they cleared it out, right? They just built themselves up, threw pieces away, and was able to get back down to ground zero, while Kyle never was able to kind of remedy that because of that speed differential. And now we're going to look again for this cleanliness, and it looks like as soon as they make a hole, they know how to clear it out, which is nice decisiveness here from Strix. And I feel like they're only faster this round. That was just a warm-up for them, right? Now even setting themselves up for T-spins that we didn't see happening in the prior round. And because of that, it's even more lethal here against Mooresville High School, against Kyle the Rep. And let's see if they can close it out a clean 3-0.
Kyle going to have to put the afterburners on here, but also simultaneously play cleaner than they have so far, and those double burns may just be too much for them to deal with. That being said, Strixus does already have that big hole
with the
Z-piece covering on top of them, missing the T-spin like we talked about. That being said, able to bring it back. Kyle finally has passed some jumped over to the enemy side, though, trying to stabilize here. Has that long bar, big drop onto the right well for Kyle the Rep. Strixus has something built somewhat in the middle right here. Misdrops that long bar maybe. Still has a lot of junk by which to play off of. Kyle the Rep, meanwhile, fully clean here, looking to open up those two spots there at the bottom. Finally, Strixix answering back, just looking for that long bar to be able to knock all the gray away. They have the opportunity to do so. There goes a J piece, jammed into the hole. Now, almost opening it up. They're going to still drop the double long bar here, and now with that L overhanging just a little bit, this is now an awkward situation for Strixix to be in.
And again, what I'm seeing out of Kyle is consistency. And I think that consistency comes from, again, you have to have the knowledge of how to set yourself up for T-spins, etc. And I don't see that knowledge coming out from Kyle, right? They're going off of pure intuition, pure, logical placement of where these pieces go. And that makes it very, very clean. And that's, I think, what's mounting here is when they can keep things clean, when they can get rid of that gray area, it's mounting those combos against Strix. But Strix and their speed and the way they're able to send these combos gets overwhelming if you make one mistake, because you see that hesitation come out from Kyle, right? They have to think, okay, how do I clear this out? And that hesitation is what Strix is able to capitalize off of and cancel out these rounds. But now, when they aren't getting those sends, they get this opportunity, right, to bail themselves out, which is exactly what they're trying to do. Clear out this gray area, and they just need that one L piece, and there it is. The long bar's coming in, and here comes the combos. That Strix is going to be uncomfortable, and since they have this trash pile built up.
That being said, long bar coming their way. Strixix able to burn down almost back towards the gray now, and with that J piece dropping and being held here, they have an opening by which to continue to push back. Kyle cleaning out very deliberately, like you're talking about, has a long bar coming their way eventually, will be able to start jamming up that left side. Strixix, meanwhile, having to play for survival here. They got a lot of very choppy holes, and they can't do it. Kyle gonna hold on, adapting beautifully, brings it to a 2-1 count.
Like I said, I don't think I saw very few mistakes from Kyle, right? Versus on the side of Strix, they make the mistakes, they know how to clean them up, or they're even just setting themselves up for those T-spins, like we saw another very similar opening to how the last round went, but without that T-spin misstep here. And I'm curious to see if that's going to be the same kind of development, because again, look at this. Kyle now building more lines than they have to, right? Keeping it low, making sure they can clear out that gray as fast as possible, because that was what allowed them to go 2-up on the side of Strix. And that's the continuation we're seeing here again, is higher attack speeds coming out from Strix with the ability to clear them out just as effectively from Kyle.
Strixix playing very clean, actually slowing down just a little bit. You see their piece per second actually drop compared to what we saw in that last game.
It was like 60 plus.
Yeah, and I think that what we're seeing out of that dynamic is that Strixix is now realizing this is the way to beat Kyle. Just put them into the uncomfortable situations rather than allowing them to fight out of it. Just continue to push junk their way. And now, because of that, they're keeping their stack much lower than what we saw in the past. Kyle already in the red zone, has a lot of holes. And I don't think they're going to be able to stack their way out of this one. Long bar all the way to the side, pushing up past the barrier here. They need to bring it back. Fighting on a knife's edge. They can't do it with the misdrop on the LPs. Strixix takes it 3-1.
And we saw them almost double their send speed there towards the end. And I like, again, we kind of saw that push and pull strategy for the first time, right? Like you mentioned, Strix taking a little bit slower because they understood that if that consistency from the side of Kyle aligned correctly and they were able to clear out all of the gray, then that was going to be too overwhelming of a combo and it would punish them in the holes they were deliberately making to get those T-spins in later on. And look at the similarity and level as well, but I'm guessing the green and the yellow are different tiers here of competition. So it's cool to see as well them kind of grow just as fast with maybe not as much experience behind them. And what I want to see from Kyle in particular moving forward is I want to see them, you know, like I mentioned before, and you could see, right, that Strix was setting themselves up for these T-spins, these combos, versus that wasn't the case with Kyle. So if you have somebody like talk to somebody you went up against, right, and they teach you how to do that, I think we're going to see Kyle become a fearsome competitor because, again, they weren't able to bail themselves out as effectively. You kind of saw them, like, pause for a second, contemplate, okay, where do I place this piece? And then they would continue. And that hesitancy is what players like Stop, like Opie, at the top of this network, don't have. And so I really think that they have a lot of growth potential here, even though they lost ultimately to Stacks here so far.
I think that Strixix also has a lot of potential to develop because you talk about how they had this fluency with being able to pull off these more advanced moves, the T-spins in particular. What I did see was this little bit of lag time where they're thinking, okay, T-spin is coming up, right? Oh yeah, sorry. I thought you were talking about for the other side, but yeah. A lot of experience that can, I think, be immediately learned through almost kind of match review, study, and a little bit of practice for the side of MHS. But when I look over at the other side and I look at Strixix, I think that at this point, it's just about jamming those games, getting that level count up to what you're seeing all these other players from Carmel be at, because to a degree, you need to start building and forging out a much more rapid pace of gameplay, and that's not something that can be learned. That's not something that can be taught or spoke to amongst friends. That's just about getting into the lobbies and putting in the time.
No, for sure. And that's the difference, though. Like, when I look at how we play Tetris, Narco, like, when we're playing it just for fun, like, in the warm-ups and getting ready for a show, I don't know how to set myself up for T-spins. I was just going off of pure speed and cleanliness when placing pieces, and I'm just, like, a little bit faster than average, which made me successful. But if I get into a game against, like Sticks and stuff, who's about the same speed as me, but knows how to set themselves up for those T-spins, that's when it becomes very difficult. And I feel like that's something you can try to learn, I feel like, from watching, from playing. But in my mind, I don't know if Kyle could learn it from this kind of environment. I think you just have to, like, ask people, like, how do I set myself up? So whether that's your support system or whether it's your fellow competitors, that's the growth I hope to see if I get the pleasure of coming back to cast Tetris again in the future. But those matches were so fast that is all we have for today, Narco.
Yeah, we were talking about, if we hit this timeline, we could go to round 3. Round 3 was an inevitability, and I think that may be the case from here on out. Like I said, a best of 5 ain't enough. Best of 7 may not even be enough, but what footage we did have was impressive, and it's really shifted how I'm viewing this game, Zobi, and I think it may be the case for you as well. So, with all that in mind, I think it is about time that we pass the baton off to the next stage, which will be Overwatch 2 tomorrow.
Yes, and it's going to be Queen and Nerdy Bird, my goat, Nerdy Bird, bringing you the action on that. And it'll be nice to see the pace change from the speed we saw in Tetris back to a game that's more team-based, a little bit more strategic. But I did enjoy getting to meet some of these individuals and get to see their skill level and see, like we mentioned, we weren't sure what we were in store for with the high school side of Tetris and where that skill level was going to be, but I think we have some budding talents. But as we mentioned, I'm Zobi. It's been a pleasure. 5 eyes on Twitter because 3 was taken. Narco, if you want to shout yourself out as well.
Yep, Nyarko on here for the esports world, but now as I'm moving into traditional sports, I go by CA Commentates on Twitter. I'm sure that you'll be able to find me there talking about pro wrestling and, real sports as well, including Tetris now, because I'm going to have to keep my eye on this realm a whole lot more. But with all that in mind, thank you to everybody at LandFest, Zotac Gaming, and the League OS portal for bringing us Indiana Esports Network. That is it for us. Have a great one.